Someone. I know you're in there. Please. Answer me. Mother? Grace. I found you.
I thought you were gone forever.
I never stopped praying I would see you again.
I'm taking you home.
On the night the prince entered the village of Umuorie, disguised as a poor traveler, the river whispered the name of the woman who would either save his kingdom or destroy his bloodline forever. Nobody saw the stranger arrive. One moment, the narrow path beside the forest was empty. The next, a tall young man in a torn brown cloak stood beneath the moonlight, staring at the village as though he had crossed the land of the dead to reach it. Behind him, the ancient forest groaned. Bats burst from the trees. Far away, a woman screamed. Then the sound stopped. The stranger's real name was Prince Adrian, only son of King Obina, ruler of the kingdom of Amandi. But in Umuorie, he called himself Daniel. He had removed his gold rings, hidden his royal scar beneath a leather band, and exchanged his silk robes for the clothes of a laborer. He had come searching for the truth. 3 young women had disappeared from villages surrounding the palace. Each had vanished beside a river. Each had been seen in dreams, wearing a queen's crown, and each had left behind the same strange symbol drawn in white ash. As Daniel entered Umuorie, he heard singing near the river. It was a woman's voice, low and sorrowful. He followed it through the tall grass. There, beneath the silver moon, stood a young woman with a clay pot balanced on her head. She wore a faded blue wrapper, and her bare feet were covered in mud. She was not dressed like a princess. She had no gold around her neck. Yet Adrian stopped breathing when he saw her. Because the river had risen around her ankles without touching the rest of the bank, and behind her, reflected in the dark water, was the shadow of a woman wearing a crown. The village girl turned sharply. "Who are you?" Adrian stared at the water again. The crowned shadow was gone. "My name is Daniel," he said. "I am only a traveler." The girl narrowed her eyes. In Umuorie, travelers do not arrive after midnight unless they are running from someone. She lowered the pot from her head, or unless something is chasing them. A cold wind passed between them. From the forest came the sound of a woman laughing. The girl did not look afraid. But Adrian saw her fingers trembling around the clay pot. "My name is Grace," she said, "and you should not stand near this river after the moon reaches the center of the sky." "Why?" Grace looked toward the water. "Because that is when it begins to call people by name." Then, from the darkness of the river, a voice whispered, "Adrian." Grace slowly turned toward him, and the prince realized the river had spoken his real name. By morning, Umuorie looked peaceful. Smoke curled above the mud houses. Women swept their compounds with short brooms. Children chased goats through narrow paths. Pestles struck mortars in a steady rhythm, while the smell of roasted yam drifted through the air. But beneath the ordinary sounds of village life, Adrian sensed fear. People stopped talking when he passed. Old men watched him from beneath the shade of the udala tree. Several doors had white chalk marks painted across them. Grace led him to the compound of her uncle, Ethan, a broad-shouldered farmer, with gray in his beard and suspicion in his eyes. "You found him near the river?" Ethan asked. Grace nodded. "At midnight?" "Yes." Ethan studied Adrian. "People who wander near that river after midnight usually do not return." "I was fortunate," Adrian replied. "No," Ethan said. "Fortune does not walk beside the Black River." The villagers called it the Black River because its water remained dark, even beneath the strongest sun. According to an old rumor, a spirit queen lived beneath it. Long ago, she had married a king of Amandi. When he betrayed her, she cursed his descendants. Every generation, the river would choose a woman. If the royal family accepted her, the kingdom would prosper. If they rejected her, the land would drink blood. Adrian had heard a different version at the palace. There, the story said the river spirit was evil and had been defeated by the first king. But the fear in Ethan's eyes suggested the village believed otherwise. "You may sleep in the old storage hut," Ethan told him. "In exchange, you will work." "I can work." Grace almost laughed. "Your hands do not look like the hands of a farmer." Adrian glanced at his palms. Though he had trained with swords and horses, he had never spent a full day tilling hard ground. "Hands can learn," he said. Grace looked directly into his eyes. Sometimes hands reveal what the mouth is hiding. For the next several days, Adrian worked beside the villagers. He carried firewood, repaired fences, and helped Ethan in the yam fields. Blisters formed across his palms, and his shoulders burned beneath the sun. Grace worked harder than anyone. She woke before dawn, fetched water, prepared food for her uncle, sold vegetables at the market, and taught letters to village children beneath a mango tree. She had lost her parents when she was 10. Her father drowned in the Black River. Her mother disappeared exactly 1 year later. Most villagers believed her mother had followed her husband into the spirit world. Grace believed something else. "My mother was taken," she told Adrian one evening. "By whom? I do not know." They sat beside a small fire, while night insects sang around them. But before she vanished, Grace continued. She said the palace was built on a lie. Adrian's expression changed. Grace noticed. "You have heard those words before." "No. You lie badly, Daniel." She leaned closer. "Who are you truly?" Before Adrian could answer, a child began screaming in the next compound. They ran toward the sound. A little boy named Peter stood beside his sleeping mat, pointing at the mud wall. Across it, drawn in white ash, was the symbol of a crown beneath a broken moon. And beneath the symbol were 4 words: "Grace must come home." Panic spread through Umuorie. The elders gathered before sunrise. Some demanded that Grace leave the village. Others said sending her away would anger whatever had marked her. An old priestess named Mama Ebele arrived carrying a staff decorated with cowrie shells. She was nearly blind, but when she faced Grace, she smiled. "So," Mama Ebele whispered, "the river has finally opened its eyes." Grace stood her ground. "What does the symbol mean?" "It means the buried story is walking again." "Whose story?" Mama Ebele turned toward Adrian. "His." Everyone stared at him. Adrian felt the weight of their suspicion. The priestess approached until her cloudy eyes were inches from his face. "You smell of palace smoke," she said. Ethan grabbed Adrian by the collar. "Who are you?" Adrian twisted free. "I am not your enemy." That is not an answer. Before the confrontation could become violent, a horn sounded from the edge of the village. A hunter had found something in the forest. The villagers followed him along a narrow trail beneath twisted trees. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no insects, only the sound of their footsteps on dry leaves. At last, they reached a clearing. A woman stood with her back against a tree. She was one of the missing girls. Her name was Amaka. She was alive, but her eyes were completely white. Mud covered her feet, and a crown of river weeds rested upon her head. Grace stepped forward. "Amaka?" The missing woman smiled. "The prince has come." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Adrian's blood turned cold. Amaka lifted one trembling finger and pointed at him. "The hidden son of the lying house." Ethan looked at Adrian with disbelief. Grace's face became still. Amaka began laughing. Then she seized Grace's wrist with unnatural strength. "The river remembers your mother," she hissed. "The river remembers what the king did to her." Grace tried to pull away. "What king?" Amaka's white eyes rolled toward Adrian. "His father." Adrian removed the leather band, covering the royal scar on his wrist. The mark of Amandi's ruling family glowed in the morning light. The villagers gasped. Ethan stepped backward. Grace stared at Adrian as though he had struck her. "You are Prince Adrian. I came here because women were disappearing. You came here wearing a lie. I could not reveal myself." Grace's eyes filled with pain. "You allowed me to trust you," Amaka suddenly screamed. Her body arched. Black water poured from her mouth. The villagers scattered in terror. Before she collapsed, she whispered one final warning. "When the prince loves the marked girl, the dead queen will rise." Then the earth beneath Grace's feet cracked open. Adrian and Grace were separated after the revelation. Grace refused to speak to him. The villagers kept Adrian under guard in Ethan's compound, while the elders argued over what to do. That night, Adrian escaped through the back of the storage hut. He found Grace alone beside her parents' abandoned house, searching through an old wooden chest. "You should not be here," she said. "I need to know what your mother discovered. You need to return to your palace." 3 women disappeared. Amaka nearly died. Your name appeared on a wall. This is bigger than both of us. Grace pulled a folded piece of cloth from the chest. Inside was a bronze necklace marked with the royal symbol. "My mother owned this," she said. "She told me never to show it to anyone." Adrian examined the pendant. On its back was an inscription, "To Abigail, blood of the first queen." Grace's mother had been named Abigail. Adrian felt the ground shift beneath him. "The first queen had no surviving children," he said. "That is what your palace teaches." Grace removed a bundle of old papers from the chest. Most had been damaged by water, but one page remained readable. It described a woman named Queen Neoma, wife of Amandi's first king. According to the record, Neoma was not a river spirit. She was a healer from Umuorie, who helped the king unite the surrounding villages. When famine struck, she advised him to open the royal grain houses. The king refused. Neoma secretly distributed food to the people. The council accused her of witchcraft. To protect his throne, the king allowed his own wife to be taken to the Black River and drowned. But Neoma's baby daughter survived. The child was hidden in Umuorie. Grace's mother was descended from that child. Grace's hands shook. "My family has royal blood." "More than that," Adrian said. "Your blood comes from the true first queen." A sound came from outside. They extinguished the lamp. Footsteps circled the house. A deep male voice spoke through the wall. "Bring us the papers, Your Highness." Adrian recognized the voice. It belonged to General Malcolm, commander of the Royal Guard and closest advisor to King Obina. The wall burst inward. Armed men entered the house. Adrian fought them in the darkness, striking one guard with a stool and disarming another. Grace threw hot ash into a soldier's eyes. They escaped through the rear window and ran into the forest. Behind them, General Malcolm shouted, "Take the girl alive. Kill the prince if you must." Grace and Adrian raced between trees, while torches moved through the darkness behind them. "Why would your father's general want you dead?" Grace asked. Adrian drew a stolen sword. "Because I think my father is no longer the one giving orders." Then a rope trap snapped around Grace's ankle and dragged her screaming into the trees. Grace awoke inside an underground chamber. Roots hung from the ceiling like dead fingers. Clay lamps burned along the walls. Ancient paintings showed Queen Neoma standing beside the Black River, surrounded by kneeling villagers. Adrian was beside Grace, his hands tied. Across from them sat Mama Ebele. "You trapped us," Grace said. "I saved you," the priestess answered. "The soldiers would have found you." Mama Ebele explained that she belonged to a secret line of guardians who had protected Neoma's descendants for generations. The terrifying rumors about the river had been encouraged by the palace. Fear kept people away from the places where evidence of the first queen's murder had been hidden. "The river does not steal women," Mama Ebele said. "Men do." The missing girls had all descended from Neoma's bloodline. Someone had been abducting them and performing rituals to discover which one carried the strongest claim to the throne. Who? Adrian asked. The man who fears that claim. General Malcolm. Mama Ebele shook her head. Malcolm serves another. Grace already knew the answer. The Royal Council. The priestess nodded. At the center of the conspiracy was Lord William, head of the council. For decades, his family had controlled Amandi's kings. They had hidden records, killed witnesses, and used the legend of the river spirit to frighten villagers into silence. King Obinna had recently discovered part of the truth. Soon afterward, he became mysteriously ill. The king is being poisoned, Adrian said. Yes. Grace looked toward a painting of Naoma. And my mother? She entered the palace years ago to confront Lord William. She never returned. Grace fought back tears. Is she dead? Mama Ebele lowered her eyes. I do not know. A drum sounded above the chamber. 3 slow beats, then 2. Mama Ebele stood quickly. We have been betrayed. The entrance exploded inward. General Malcolm descended with armed soldiers. He seized Mama Ebele and struck Adrian to the ground. Grace was dragged toward the doorway. Malcolm smiled. Lord William has waited many years for the last daughter of Neoma. Adrian struggled against the soldiers. If you hurt her, I will tear down every stone in the palace. Malcolm laughed. You still do not understand, my prince. He leaned close. You are not being taken back as a prisoner. Adrian stared at him. You are being taken back for your coronation. The palace of Amandi rose above the capital like a stone mountain. Crowds gathered as Adrian returned under royal guard. The official story spread quickly. The prince had completed a secret journey among the people and was now ready to inherit the throne. No one mentioned Grace. She was taken through a hidden passage beneath the palace. Adrian was brought before his father. King Obinna sat in the throne hall, thin and pale. His hands trembled. His eyes remained sharp, but he could barely move his mouth. Lord William stood beside him in white robes. My prince, William said warmly, the kingdom celebrates your return. Adrian approached the throne. What have you done to my father? The council members murmured. William's smile did not change. His Majesty is ill. He is being poisoned. Silence fell. General Malcolm placed a hand on his sword. William walked slowly toward Adrian. Be careful. Grief can make a young man imagine enemies everywhere. Adrian turned to the council. The first queen of Amandi was murdered by the throne. Her descendants were hidden in Umuorie. Women from that bloodline have been abducted. Shock crossed several faces. Others looked away. William's voice hardened. You speak dangerous nonsense. King Obinna suddenly knocked a cup from the table. It shattered on the floor. With great effort, he pointed at William. Then he dragged one finger across his own throat. The meaning was clear. William had tried to kill him. Guards moved toward the council leader, but General Malcolm drew his sword and struck the captain of the guard. Chaos erupted. Soldiers loyal to William surrounded the throne. William removed a small bottle from his robe. For generations, kings have imagined they ruled Amandi, he said, but kingdoms are not controlled by crowns, they are controlled by secrets. He poured the liquid into the king's mouth. Adrian attacked. Malcolm blocked him, and their swords clashed across the throne hall. King Obinna convulsed. Adrian fought with rage, driving Malcolm backward, but more guards surrounded him. William leaned toward the dying king. Your son will wear the crown tonight. By morning he will be dead. The council will mourn him and choose a new ruler. King Obinna looked at Adrian. A tear slid down his face. Then the king stopped breathing. Adrian screamed. At that same moment, deep beneath the palace, Grace heard a woman whisper from behind a sealed stone door. My daughter. Grace froze. The voice came again. Grace. She pressed her ear against the stone. Mother. Grace searched the underground cell, until she found a loose iron bar. Using all her strength, she struck the old lock again and again. At last, it broke. She entered a narrow passage filled with the smell of damp earth and old blood. The voice guided her deeper. Behind another wooden door, she found a woman chained to the wall. Her hair was gray. Her body was painfully thin. Scars covered her arms. But Grace recognized her eyes. "Mother?" The woman lifted her face. "My little Grace." For several seconds, neither moved.
Mother? Grace. I found you.
Then Grace fell into her mother's arms. Abigail had been imprisoned for 16 years. Lord William had kept her alive because she knew where the original royal covenant was hidden. The document proved that Queen Noyoma had been co-founder of Amandi and that her descendants could legally challenge any ruler who abandoned the welfare of the people. Abigail had refused to reveal its location. William tortured her, but could not break her. "Why is he taking women from our bloodline?" Grace asked. "He believes one of us knows the words that opened Naoma's shrine." Grace remembered the strange song her mother had taught her as a child. A song about moonlight, water, and a crown without gold. Her mother's face changed when Grace mentioned it. "That is not a children's song," Abigail said. "It is the key." A guard entered the passage. Grace struck him with the broken iron bar, took his keys, and freed her mother. Together, they moved through the tunnels. Above them, drums announced the death of King Obina. Then another announcement echoed through the palace. Prince Adrian would be crowned before midnight. Abigail stopped. "They will kill him during the ceremony." Grace gripped her mother's hand. "Then we must reach the shrine first." They escaped through a drainage tunnel leading from the palace to the forest. But at the river bank, General Malcolm waited with 6 soldiers. He had blood on his clothes. "Lord William wants the song," he said. Grace stepped in front of her mother. "You will not touch her." Malcolm smiled. "You are brave. That is why the prince loves you." Grace's expression shifted. Malcolm drew his sword. "It is also why he will die calling your name." Before he could attack, arrows flew from the trees. 2 soldiers fell. Ethan emerged with hunters from Umuorie. Beside him stood Amaka, weak but alive. The villagers charged. A brutal fight broke out beside the river. Malcolm wounded Ethan and escaped on horseback toward the palace. Grace wanted to follow, but Abigail pulled her toward the water. The shrine opens only before midnight. Grace looked at the palace lights in the distance. Adrian's coronation had already begun. The throne hall was filled with nobles, soldiers, and village chiefs. Adrian stood before the council wearing royal robes. His father's body had already been removed. A ceremonial crown rested on a red cushion, but Adrian noticed something horrifying. The white decorations around its base were not carved ivory. They were human teeth. The teeth of the missing women. Lord William raised his staff. Tonight, Prince Adrian becomes King of Amandi. Adrian looked toward every exit. Guards loyal to William controlled the room. He had no weapon, no allies, and no sign of Grace. William placed the crown on Adrian's head. The hall erupted in applause. A cup of ceremonial wine was brought forward. Adrian knew it contained poison. "To the new king," William declared. Adrian lifted the cup. Then the palace shook. A deep sound rose from beneath the ground. Not thunder, singing, Grace's voice. Far away at the Black River, Grace stood waist-deep in the water, singing the ancient song her mother had taught her. The river began to glow. Mist rose around her. Beneath the surface, stone steps appeared. Grace descended while Abigail, Ethan, and the villagers watched from the bank. At the bottom of the river stood a shrine untouched by water. Inside, Grace found a clay vessel containing the royal covenant, Naoma's crown, and a small iron box. When she opened the box, she discovered dozens of written confessions from past kings. Each confession described the same crime. The royal council had murdered anyone who tried to expose the truth. One document carried the seal of Adrian's grandfather. Another carried the handwriting of King Obina. Obina had discovered the conspiracy months earlier and recorded everything before he was poisoned. Grace took the documents and crown. As she emerged from the river, lightning split the sky. The water behind her rose like a dark wall. Within it appeared the enormous figure of Queen Naoma. The villagers fell to their knees, but Grace remained standing. The spirit did not look evil. She looked wounded. Her voice rolled across the village like distant thunder. "Take back the truth." Then the wall of water collapsed. At the palace, every flame went out. In the darkness, Adrian threw the poisoned wine into Lord William's face. He seized the ceremonial sword and attacked the guards. The coronation became a battlefield. General Malcolm entered, wounded but alive. He lunged at Adrian. Their blades collided beneath the moonlight, pouring through the windows. Malcolm fought with savage strength. "You could have ruled peacefully," he shouted. "Peace built on graves is not peace," Adrian answered. Malcolm knocked the sword from Adrian's hand. He raised his blade for the killing blow. A voice rang through the hall. "Stop!" Grace stood at the entrance wearing Neoma's ancient crown. Behind her came the people of Umuorie, and behind them stood Abigail, the woman the palace had buried alive for 16 years. Lord William's face turned white. Grace held up the royal covenant. The first queen was murdered. Her descendants were hunted. King Obina was poisoned. Every crime is recorded here. William laughed nervously. "Old papers prove nothing." Abigail stepped forward. "Then perhaps your own letters will." She opened the iron box. Inside were orders signed by William authorizing the kidnappings, poisonings, and secret executions. The council members began to turn against him. William grabbed a knife and seized Grace. He pressed the blade to her throat. "Drop the sword, Adrian." Adrian froze. William dragged Grace toward the throne. Adrian charged. William stumbled backward and fell onto the throne. The crown of teeth dropped beside him. General Malcolm rushed toward Grace. Abigail stepped between them. Malcolm's blade entered Abigail's stomach. Grace screamed. Adrian struck Malcolm down. The general collapsed at the foot of the throne. Grace caught her mother before she reached the floor. Abigail touched her daughter's face. "I came back for you." Grace wept. "You cannot leave me again." Her mother smiled faintly. "I never truly did." Then Abigail died in her daughter's arms. Outside, the Black River began to roar. Lord William crawled toward a hidden door behind the throne. Grace saw him and followed. He fled through the underground passage leading to the river. Adrian ran after them. Rain began to fall. William reached the riverbank and found the water rising rapidly. Grace stood behind him, soaked and shaking with grief. "You killed my mother." William drew the knife again. "Your mother chose suffering. She could have given me the covenant. You were afraid of a village woman. I was protecting the kingdom." "No," Grace said. "You were protecting your power." He charged at her. Before he reached her, the river surged around his legs. Black hands formed from the water. William screamed as they pulled him toward the current. Adrian grabbed Grace and dragged her back. William clawed at the mud. "Help me! I am head of the royal council." The river pulled harder. Grace stared at him. "You buried the truth beneath this water." Lightning illuminated the crowned shadow of Queen Naoma, standing behind him. "Now the river will remember you." William disappeared beneath the surface. The water became calm. For a long moment, Adrian and Grace stood silently in the rain. Then Adrian removed the crown from his head. "I am sorry," he said. Grace looked at him. "For what?" "For coming into your life with a false name, for the crimes of my family, for failing to save your mother. You did not kill her." "But my palace imprisoned her." Grace turned toward the river. My mother used to say, a person is not judged by the house that gave them birth. They are judged by the house they build after. Adrian stepped closer. I do love you, Grace, but I will not ask you to enter the same palace that destroyed your family. Grace looked at the royal covenant in her hands. The palace is not the kingdom. She faced him. The people are. In the days that followed, Lord William's supporters were arrested. The missing women were rescued from hidden chambers beneath the palace. Some returned home. Others remained haunted by what they had endured. King Obinna was buried beside his ancestors. At Grace's request, Abigail was buried in Umuorie, near the mango tree, where Grace taught children. Adrian delayed his coronation. Instead, he summoned village leaders, farmers, traders, healers, and elders from every corner of Amandi. For the first time, ordinary people stood inside the royal council hall. Grace entered wearing a simple white wrapper. Some nobles laughed when they saw her. One of them, Lord Henry, rose angrily. This woman has no education in law, war, or governance. Grace looked at him calmly. What is governance? Henry frowned. The administration of the kingdom. No, Grace replied. Governance is ensuring a child does not sleep hungry while grain rots behind palace walls. The hall became quiet. Another counselor asked, what would you do if two villages fought over one river? Grace answered, I would not begin by asking which village is stronger. I would ask why the river is no longer enough for both. A military chief challenged her. What protects a kingdom better than soldiers? Grace looked toward the gathered villagers, the trust of the people those soldiers come from. Even Adrian was surprised by the depth of her answers. Grace proposed that royal grain houses be opened during famine, that every village choose representatives, and that no person be imprisoned without public charges. She demanded that women be allowed to inherit farmland. She also demanded that the truth about Queen Neoma be taught to every child. Some nobles resisted. The people supported her. After 3 days of debate, the council formally recognized Neoma as co-founder of Amandi and Grace as her lawful descendant. Adrian was crowned king, but when the royal priest asked whom he had chosen as queen, Adrian did not call Grace forward. Instead, he stepped down from the throne and approached her before everyone. The first king took power from your ancestor, he said. I will not repeat his crime by assuming your answer. He knelt. Grace Abigail Neoma, will you stand beside me, not beneath me, as Queen of Amandi? Tears filled Grace's eyes. She remembered the muddy fields, the village children, the nights she had waited for a mother who never returned. She remembered Adrian carrying firewood with blistered hands, pretending to be Daniel. Then she smiled. Yes. The hall erupted with cheers, but outside, beyond the palace walls, Mama Ebele stood alone beneath the broken moon. She looked toward the black river. A crowned shadow moved across the water. And the priestess whispered, the debt is not finished. Grace became the most beloved queen Amandi had ever known. She did not abandon Umuorie. She built a school beneath the old mango tree and named it Abigail House. She ordered bridges constructed across dangerous rivers, opened the royal farms to widows, and created a council where common people could speak directly before the king and queen. When drought came, she released grain before hunger spread. When two villages nearly went to war, she sat between their chiefs beneath the sun until they found peace. People began calling her the Queen of Wisdom. Adrian ruled beside her, no longer hiding behind a false name. But sometimes, on quiet nights, Grace still walked to the Black River. She would stand at the bank and listen. Most nights, she heard only frogs, insects, and the distant beating of village drums. On the first anniversary of her mother's death, Grace went to the river alone. The moon was broken by clouds. She placed flowers on the water. "Mother," she whispered, "the kingdom knows the truth now." A soft wind moved through the trees. The river answered with Abigail's voice. "I know." Grace's eyes filled with tears. Then another voice spoke from the water, older, deeper. Queen Naoma, the throne has changed, but power always hungers. Grace looked toward the palace lights in the distance. What must I do? Remember who you were before they placed gold upon your head. The water became still. Grace removed her crown and held it against her chest. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Adrian approached, carrying 2 clay cups. I thought a queen might be thirsty, he said. Grace smiled. And who told you to follow me? The last time I allowed you to walk near this river alone, an ancient spirit rose from the water and changed the kingdom. He handed her a cup. I am learning from my mistakes. They sat together on the riverbank. For a while, neither spoke. Then Grace asked, Do you miss Daniel? Adrian laughed softly. And for the first time in generations, the river did not whisper of blood, betrayal, or death. It whispered of a village girl who carried the courage of forgotten queens, a girl who had once walked barefoot through mud, a girl who challenged kings, exposed monsters, and faced the spirits of an ancient river, a girl who entered the palace without surrendering her heart to it. And that was why the people loved Queen Grace, not because she wore a crown, but because even after she became queen, she never forgot what it meant to be unseen. Yet in the deepest part of the forest, beneath the roots of a dead Iroko tree, something old opened its eyes. The fall of Lord William had ended one secret, but it had awakened another. A hand covered in white ash emerged from the soil. On the ground, it drew the symbol of a crown beneath a broken moon. Then a voice whispered through the darkness, The queen has returned. And somewhere inside the palace, Grace suddenly woke from her sleep, because she had heard it too. What do you think the symbol truly means? Was Queen Naoma protecting Grace, or was she preparing her for something even darker? Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories.